Ready?
I am. Yeah.
We're now live. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning. Good evening to some people who might be listening from further afield in the UK. My name's Ed Beechner-Collins, and I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at Notio. And today I'm joined by Dan Bigham, who will, for some, maybe need no introduction, but we'll obviously explain a little bit more a little bit later on. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the agenda that we put together today is really just to cover a little bit more about Notio, what it is in some detail. Maybe not a huge amount of time to get into all the aspects of it. And then also using Dan's expertise, we're going to talk about aerodynamics. He's a lot more qualified than I to talk about that, and hopefully that will be some useful information for everybody towards the second half of this presentation. We are recording the session, so things you might want to listen back on, you will be able to go and rewatch. We will eventually put this on our YouTube channel, so that will be available. If people require any in-depth information about the product, I will post some links, but you can reach out to us. We're happy to do these types of sessions, speak to you on email, phone, whichever, and help you. So that's people who've already got the product or people who are looking to, see what it's all about. If you've got any particular questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So moving on. So the way we define Notio, and this is, if everybody in a competitive world looking for an edge, and I always say I'm also a coach, so that's how I got involved with Notio. But for those of you out there who might be looking to find those extra watts, there's obviously a couple of different ways you can do that. You can train a little harder and try and find that extra power. You can become better at pacing if it's TT you're doing, or triathlon, and so on. Or, as devices like Notio come to the market, there are also other ways to become a little smarter. And it's obviously previously a lot of this technology is something you go in the wind tunnel and do and try and find these extra gains and these extra bits of equipment that might help you find those extra watts. So, what we say, more speed, same watts, and obviously let's take a deeper look and see what Notio is all about. So just to put some context, Notio is a wholly owned company of Argon 18, the bike brand. It was founded in the Notio product, or the Notio company, was founded in 2016. With the original idea of putting the technology inside a bike. And here you can see in the background a picture of that bike that was, sort of purported to sort of like a proof of concept, if you like, that would allow you to see, okay, can we put some of these sensors inside the bike? So that's where the vision started. Then we developed the product as a standalone device in 2017. So, and this timeline will also give you an idea the amount of time and effort that we've put in to developing the product. Because what we're trying to achieve with measuring, when you put devices like this on the bike, what we're trying to achieve is actually, it's not that easy, which is why it's not probably been done by so many people already. Then we took the product and made it available, and we worked with teams and federations, and that's how I got to work with Dan and his team, which we'll hear more about a little later on. Then we started to bring more, more refinements, more updates to the platform in 2019, and then recently in September 2019, we rebranded as Notio.ai and made the product available beyond coaches and teams. So it's now available. That we're also part of a artificial intelligence. We've got a presence at a very renowned institute in Montreal, where we're based. And we're obviously using some of that to help us to solve some of these problems, which we'll explain a little bit more as we move on through this presentation. Just as a reminder to everybody, there is a Q&A, so please feel free to add any questions. We will try and get to those a little later on, but obviously as questions crop up, or if there's questions that we may not cover for you, please reach out to us afterwards as well. So as I said, Montreal happens to be where we're located, and that's obviously quite important because there's lots of access to people involved in technology. There's a lot of technology companies based in Montreal, and obviously, as I said just earlier, the artificial intelligence hub that we're part of is part of helping us to solve some of the problems that we're trying to solve with Notio. So all the people in the company in Notio, that is, we come from a technology background, myself included. And obviously we see that it's important because we understand technology. And obviously in my case, I'm also a coach, which I understand the industry. And then by being part of, or still owned by Argon 18, we understand the bike industry. So I think that's, that's a good mix of people to help develop and bring the product to where it is today and to continue. We've got the right people in place to help us do that. So that comprises of hardware engineers, software engineers, electrical engineers, data analysts, designers, and so on to help. So it's a lot of effort in the background, lots of people working very hard to do what we do. So what we offer, so the Notio unit itself, and it comes with a compatible iOS smartphone app, which is available now to end users, and depending on where you are in the world, that's via distributors, dealers, and if you're in North America, it's available, in Canada, it's available on the web. We also are keen to work with teams, federations, coaches, and bike fitters still, so obviously there's some extra features and things that we do there, namely around support to help, and as we'll present a little later on stuff that we're doing around that. So that's in a nutshell. That's what we're offering. We've also built a lot of charts and analysis tools inside Golden Cheetah, which we see as an advanced part of the offering, and again I'll talk a little bit about that. So that is also part of the consideration or part of the package that we offer to help people use the product. So Notio, as I said, this is the unit here itself, and obviously very small and light. Been through several iterations to get it to this size. And obviously designed to be mounted on the front of your bike. The app I mentioned is used for basic sort of pure testing out on the road. You can't carry a laptop, obviously. So we've spent a lot of time building features into the app. And for those of you listening and tuned in, the old app that you might have used, there is an upgrade path to allow you to get to these new this new app, and obviously the hardware firmware would need to be upgraded to allow you to do that. But just get in touch if you want to do that. If you buy the product today, you won't have to do that. It'll come with the latest firmware, and obviously you can go to the iOS store and download the app. We're continuing to make sure our iOS app is fully out there and tested, and we do have the ambition to produce an Android app, so we do get asked for that, so I just want to clear that one up. And obviously it's just one of those things we don't want to have two apps, not 100%. We want to get absolutely one right, and then the Android will follow. So the other piece of the jigsaw, as I explained, you have your on your laptop or MacBook, you can analyze data coming from the Notio on Golden Cheetah, which we'll go into, and this data can be transferred obviously from the device, because the device itself doesn't have any connectivity to the internet. You have to pair that with your phone, which is done over Bluetooth. And then obviously, if you want to put the data onto Golden Cheetah, you can obviously, it'll sync to the internet, which will then allow you to go to your computer and analyze the files there. However, the Golden Cheetah piece is really, it's an advanced feature. We will be covering that in a separate webinar later on. So it's, you know, the app, we have enough functionality to allow you to do testing, see results, and so on. But for those of you who want to do more, there is that Golden Cheetah option as well. But as I said, we will do more education stuff in the future over the next few months to help users really get to know how that works. Obviously, your devices, power meter, speed sensor, we'll go into that. That's communicating with the Notio via AND+. So that's how we get the information to the Notio, and then obviously the Notio is talking to your phone, which in turn can give you data, or you can transfer that to the cloud or the internet, whichever you want to call it. So the Notio itself, and this is obviously, again, with the advent of technology, being able to put all these different sensors, so barometer, gyroscope, accelerometer, and various sensors that the Notio contains. And obviously it has to have a battery, it has to have memory, you know, and to sort of make that and compress it down to one device, you know, that was impossible. I think this is one of the reasons why these devices now become, you know, this type of measuring in the field, which would have been very difficult to do, you know, 10 years ago, is now possible because of the advent and sort of changes in how small sensors are getting. And obviously, as we well know, they're happening not just in cycling and in lots of different areas. So no doubt that will just continue. The mobile app itself, which you download from the App Store, is really your place, as I said earlier, to set up your account, create a user. You can obviously see your rides, you can analyze your rides. And again, for those of you who may not have seen the new app yet, and those of you may have used the product early on, you would have had to download your files to Golden Cheetah, do the analysis, whereas now we brought that to the iOS app, which makes it a little bit less time for you to get data out of the device. But as I said, you still have the option to go and do more in Golden Cheetah if you so wish. For some people as well, just on that point, you know, some people export the data out of, you know, away from the device. So I know of people using the product, they export the data and put it into other programs. That's also possible. So that means that if you don't like using some of the the technology that we've built or use, there is an option still to take the data and do your own number crunching if you so wish. So and Dan will talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that he does a little bit later on, but that is also possible. So then this is the my account area on the website. So you can obviously, if you've collected the data, you've done some rides, you can take it and put that and view it. And as I said just there, you can download that data as you wish. And obviously we provide a specific version of Golden Cheetah for you to analyze that data. And Golden Cheetah is capable of going and grabbing this information. And again, as I said, we're happy to do one-to-one, or anybody who wants to discuss Golden Cheetah a little bit further. There are some videos available. Just get in touch with us and we'll be happy to go through that. But as I said, we will be doing specific webinars just on Golden Cheetah in the future. So hopefully maybe if we have time at the end of this, I'll be happy to go and do some of that as well. So the other thing I would point out is there are other features on the Notio. I mean, the main feature that everybody looks at and sees is that it measures your your drag coefficient, and so on. And that's what it's designed to do in the field, in the real world, you know, on your TT bike, you know, and when you're training or whatever it might be. But there are also other sensors. So we measure vibration. We have a gyroscope, so we see you can see side to side movement. There's an accelerometer in the device. And right now our focus is to allow for analyzing and creating a tool that will measure coefficient drag. However, in the future, we see that some of these other features, you know, that we haven't really fully explored in terms of analysis, but we're collecting the data. For those a little bit, you know, you want to know more of the detail, we collect data at 4 Hertz. So that's quite a sizable. There is, you know, a lot of data. That's 4 times per second that we're collecting this data. Obviously, if you have a power meter that can provide the 4 times a second, you can get that also. Not many do, but in terms of the other metrics, we measure 4 times a second to be able to make the calculations and so on, and the data we need to produce the coefficient drag. So moving on. So as I said, just a reminder, if you want a one-to-one demo, you want technical support or general product questions, just submit a ticket. This link will be available afterwards. We'd be more than happy. We've got support staff available in Europe on European time. And then also we have staff available out of head office in Montreal who can also help with that. So just reach out if you feel you need to get some help before we do some more webinars like this. Okay, so just to sort of, you know, as I said earlier, we've been working with teams and federations and different sort of competitive environments. And this is a really good example, which is maybe Dan, you might want to talk better to this, seeing as you were the one who was doing the testing. But I thought it's just important to validate that. There's a lot of people ask the question, you know, what have we done to validate the device? What have we done to test? We're always testing. We're always trying to sort of measure the accuracy and stuff like that. But I think what's important, and this is a very good case to point out, is that, you know, when you test in the field, and as I said, we'll let Dan talk through this in a second. It's quite important to realize that, you know, there are environmental conditions that you're trying to deal with, but you know, if you want to see an improvement and you get a baseline, which is exactly what we have in the current app, you get a baseline CDA, you go test, you see what the difference is, and so on. And then in addition to that, we have spent lots of time, and we also have independent university tests where they're testing the device also to measure its validity, and so on. But as I said, I think probably some of the best tests are seeing real world examples. So Dan, do you want to just talk through this a little bit? I'm sort of putting this on you on the hoof, by the way. I don't know if you...
Sure. That's fine. So Jumbo Visma is the team that I started working with at the start of 2019, and Wout van Aert was obviously quite a big prospect for them, and how we developed throughout that season on the road. And his numbers from a time trial perspective were pretty astronomical, but he wasn't getting the speed out that you would kind of expect for what he was producing. He had a pretty tight schedule running into what was already going to be a very busy season. So he identified that the only time to do any sort of aero testing was going to be at an altitude camp in Sierra Nevada. I don't know if anybody here has been there, but it's not flat, that's for sure. And there's no velodromes, indoor, outdoor. They've got an athletics track, and that's about it. So we spent a bit of time looking at different roads, and actually settled on using the main sort of, I'd say, gently sloping road that leads to Sierra Nevada, or to Popura, or whatever the town's called there. So typically you're getting a car every 5 minutes at a push. There's a lot of very empty road, very quiet roads, very smooth and very consistent. From a power input perspective, we actually didn't have him producing any power at all. We decided to give us a number of events from different, it became headwind, tailwind, crosswind, all the way down. Very small, but still an important variable to be measuring. But it also gave us a very, very accurate slope. And obviously all the energy input coming from this test was from gravity, his gravitational potential energy. So we're measuring his system mass at the start of every single run, because that might change if he drank or gone to the toilet or had something to eat, or we'd obviously change something on the bike. And then simply put, that's his energy input. And as he's coasting down the hill, all of his drag loss is either through his tyres or through his aero. And when he was riding down at 65k an hour, there's a whole lot of energy input. Full stop. It's sort of 600 plus watts of energy. So it actually makes it quite easy to differentiate differences in CDA. You can see on the graph on the right hand side, I've had to take the axis down. Unfortunately, Jumbo don't want everybody in the world knowing well CDA, but you can see from all the different runs, there were quite obvious step changes. So that CDA difference was 0.01 meter squared. It's quite a day, and you can see different points as well. Like the red spike was where I think he had to lift his head up because I can't remember what it was. It was something on the road, maybe like a goat had run across or something like that. But yeah, it was just, he would have been able to test. He wouldn't have been able to. He made pretty drastic improvements in his aero, and then he went on. He won the Dauphiné TT, won the Belgian national champs. Obviously beat Victor Campenaerts there, which is quite an upset. He was on for a great time in the they did a great team time trial in the Tour, and then obviously had his crash that's taken him out since then. But I'm sure he's going to come back and surprise many people this year.
Okay, that's great, Dan. Thank you very much. And I think, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I think maybe just lost you slightly, but are you there now? Or you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm here now. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, might be your end. Okay, hopefully it will play ball for the rest of this, because we're sort of moving into your section now. So, but yeah, so I think it's important to say that we have been out there using the product. I would add also that we have worked with some other federations and teams also, where that input's been obviously really, really useful to try and help further develop the product. One other question that we get asked, and obviously this time of the year, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, the weather's not great for testing outside. We have got some protocols for helping people use the device indoors, even though the Notio has always been designed as an outside tool. But we have, again, if you're trying to test on the velodrome, just get in touch, because obviously at the moment the app that we have is suggesting that you do an out and back, which of course you cannot necessarily do on a velodrome. But we have found some workarounds in the meantime to allow you to get some meaningful data if testing on the velodrome. And we fully accept that to be able to use the device, especially when the weather's not brilliant during the winter months, that it is a viable option. Okay, so moving on. So I think, Dan, maybe we hand over to you and get into some more of the sort of stuff that, and obviously I'm just conscious of, your use. But I was just explain to everybody, as I said, you may have already noticed, but I'm based in the UK. And when I first started working with Notio, I reached out to Dan to say, I think this is something maybe you might want. And we met, and obviously that's where this sort of, we started working and helping the guys. And obviously I'll let Dan explain more about his background and how he uses Notio, which I guess is probably what everybody wants to hear. Yeah, so over to you again, Dan. Thanks. Hello, Dan.
Sure. So my background is motorsport engineering. I studied at university, bachelor's and master's. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Yeah, that's better. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm on a bit of a delay, but I'll keep on talking. So yeah, I worked in Formula 1 with Mercedes-AMG Petronas, and then post-university, I also went on to work in Olympic sport with British athletics, helping a lot of athletes obviously go on to try and win Olympic golds. And that kind of pushed me more to my own athletic career. And at the time, I was starting to take cycling a little more seriously. Started to progress on the road, and at the end of 2016 rounded up a few friends from my road team and that I'd met in the world of cycling, and decided to have a go at the track. And we went to the British National Championships in 2017, and I won the individual pursuit, the kilo, and we won the team pursuit. We beat the National Senior Academy and broke the competition record, which was a bit of a turn up for the books. And from there we've kind of progressed really as a team. We've always, I guess, endeavoured to embrace good science and good physics, and just approach everything with objectivity. As team members, we've always had guys who've had good grounding in scientifics, whether it's sports science with Tipper, myself and Charlie have both been engineers, and so is Harry. Johnny's background is psychology. So yeah, we all have our own, I guess, areas of expertise that we've always wanted to find a good, cool outlet for, and that's what HUUB Wattbike's been. We've gone on to race at the World Cup level and at Commonwealth Games and at World Championships. And Charlie was the 2018 Team Pursuit World Champion. We've won two World Cup gold medals in the team pursuit and one in the individual pursuit, and a silver in the IB as well at another World Cup. And then recently, myself, John, and Harry also raced the team time trial at the 2019 Road World Champs, where we got the bronze medal. So kind of, hopefully anyway, I think cover most spaces on application of the science, understanding of it, but also just riding a bike. If you want, Ed, can you go to the next slide? I don't think I've got control. Or do I?
You do.
I do indeed.
You're in control now.
Good. So yeah, I think I'm probably preaching to the converted on a lot of this, but I often talk to a lot of people who don't quite understand how big or how important aerodynamics are for cyclists. So if you break down drag, all the power that you're producing, all that energy that you're putting in, it has to go somewhere. It doesn't just disappear. I mean, people have probably heard it. Energy can't be created or destroyed. But there's a few simple losses or storage devices, for want of a better phrase, of where your power or energy goes to. So typically, you've got your drivetrain loss, give or take, could be between 2%, maybe 5%, sometimes even more if you've not looked after your drivetrain very well. Your tyres, which is also a loss. When you roll along, rubber has what's called hysteresis losses, and your tyres get slightly warmer and they make a little bit of noise. So that's where some of your energy goes to. Then the other ones are kinetic energy storage, so your actual mass and the inertia of your wheels, that stores some energy which you can get back. Gravity, so if you go up or down a hill, if you go up the hill, then you store energy as gravitational potential energy, which you get when you come back down. And then the final loss, so all of your aero drag energy is lost to the air. You can't get it back, unlike stored kinetic energy or gravitational potential energy, not least because it makes the biggest proportion of where all that energy loss is going to. So people throw about numbers of 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of your drag is aero. You can put a number on it. It does vary every single second, whether you're going up a hill, down a hill, for different riders and different conditions. But a good rule of thumb is it's typically between sort of 70 and 80%. It can be more and it can be less, but obviously is therefore very, very worthwhile focusing on. And that's, I guess, where Notio comes in, is it allows you to start to measure what is happening and where all your energy losses are going to. So effectively, as Ed said, it's high-speed multivariable data logger. It's taking all the sensor data that you already have on your bike, your power meter, your wheel speed. You can connect up a whole lot of other things as well if you want heart rate and your gears with D-Fly. And I know they're in the pipeline to try and connect to pretty much any AMP plus sensor that you'd like. Obviously, Moxie have some cool stuff with muscle oxygen saturation and total hemoglobin. So there's lots of cool little metrics that will hopefully then start to appear within Notio for even more in-depth analysis and correlation between all the important and cool variables that people can now measure. But in short, what it's doing is taking those sensors, logging them at higher rates. Your Garmin or your Wahoo or even your SRM head unit will typically log at 1 hertz. So your power meter typically or will transmit at 2 different rates. It'll transmit ANT plus basic power and ANT plus main power. Main power is 4 data packets a second. So you're just picking up all of those data packets, 4 times as much data, and you can start to really look into what's happening. Airspeed is hugely important outside, as everybody here knows. Headwinds and tailwinds, just part and parcel of riding outside. If you don't measure them, then it's a massive error source in doing aerodynamic testing and analysis outside. But also slope is a big one. If you're not accounting for the change in gravitational potential energy, then you'll soon create some pretty big errors in your calculations. Vibration is one that not a lot of people start to look at on the road. I know there's some good data out there and some good discussions around hysteresis losses. Silka tend to be leading the way with Josh Portner, and he's done some good stuff. But effectively, by measuring the applied or the vertical oscillation force, vertical oscillation acceleration, then you will be able to have a much better understanding of what's happening at the tire contact patch. It's not perfect by any means. There's a lot of stuff that's happening at an even higher rate, but it's going in the right direction of understanding whether you're on a rough surface and your rolling resistance is going to increase or decrease if you're on a smooth surface. And air density, very, very important. But you can also track and see what temperature you're at as well. And that can start to tie into your rolling resistance coefficient. A warm tire actually rolls quicker than a cold tire, which I'm sure people have started to clock on, especially in motorsport. It's not just about grip, it's also a bit about rolling resistance. So by effectively measuring all these variables, you can start to account for where that energy is going to. Whether it's your drivetrain, tires, accelerations, decelerations, uphills, downhills. And when you've got effectively taken all of that excess energy off from the power that you're putting in, you're left with a lump of energy that's got to be purely aerodynamic drag. And you can then resolve the aero drag equation to calculate CDA. And what Notio does is does that every single quarter of a second, and you get a CDA value as you're riding along. It's by no means perfect. There's always going to be errors in measurements, and there are some assumptions around things like airspeed, and it's probably one that will be discussed as aero sensors like Notio become more commonplace, that you are measuring airspeed at a single point and not all around the rider. But unfortunately, to put a massive big pitot rake around a rider is 1, not cheap, and 2, not remotely functional. You've probably seen it in Formula One, where a lot of the cars, especially on test days, have big aero rakes strapped to their car, and that's what they're doing. They're looking at the pressure that's occurring at each of those points and helping that to correlate with CFD in the wind tunnel. But it's not by any means functional on a bike, but it's a very, very good starting point, and it does mean that you can start to get some very, very good and very, very helpful data. So for ourselves, to be honest, I've used it for a lot of different things, but where I guess it's found its home with ourselves is being able to do some very, very in-depth analysis of what's happening in track testing, track training, and track racing. And I guess the way they all roll into what happens in a training session if you're doing a turn on the front, or you could always change your helmet between lots of runs and start to get a good understanding of the changes of that. Or effectively, you can pretty much do aero tests all the time whenever you're riding. We mostly use it for position, equipment, training, analysis, and we're using it on the velodrome. We've taken the back-end data, so whenever you go and ride with a Notio Connect, you'll get a CSV file. You can download it off the cloud, or you can email it straight from yourself from the app. And then we've created our own back-end software, so we use MATLAB for our analysis. On the right-hand side, you can see this was a flying 8K just a few days ago, actually, that we were doing as a team. At the top is the data in golden sheets there. So you can see the power, cadence, the roll angle as you're going down the velodrome, around the velodrome, and the gyro output. And this is just one of our graphs in the bottom right-hand corner. I'd love to show you some of the cool in-depth stuff that we do, but I guess in a way it's a bit of an industry secret right now. It's probably one of our strengths, I would say, and I don't want our competitors. What that is each rider, or a rider's speed profile they are on the line. So if they're sitting man 4, man 3, man 2, or man 1, what speed are they doing? So in this one, you can see man 1's riding quite well, and at the back end is really accelerating on his final turn. We'll also look at the coefficient variance as well. So during every single half lap, how much is that speed varying? And what we effectively want is it's very smooth in the line, it's very easy to follow. So just is a good example of how we analyze our training data, and that's just one. We have power, obviously, we have CDA, we have watts to CDA, we have what I call draft efficiency or draft speed. So it's the difference between a simple objective measure on how well each rider is riding behind the riders ahead. And if you can reduce your airspeed as much as possible, saving more energy than another rider may do. But that objective measure means that one rider can compare another rider and see how well they're doing or how much they really need to improve. And it's been a consistent measure in us since we started using this. It's just about 18 months ago now. So it's been great little tool.
Yeah, still here, Dan.
And then from a strategy perspective, we can start to look at what happens when we try different strategies. How do riders fatigue over longer turns or shorter turns? Do they fatigue on longer turns? Do they drop off? Oh, sorry about that. My signal's not fantastic. The Wi-Fi has not been great in Barbados. So that's just obviously one of the examples there. But we're using it on every single individual and team track session to analyze every single pedal. There's a lot of cool stuff that Notio enables us to do. Another one, just it's obviously not showing on this slide, but in the run up to the World Team Time Trial Champs, his mum had passed away just a few weeks out, so he was spending a lot of time back at home sort of dealing with that, and didn't mind. What we ended up doing was using the Notio very accurate data for what Harry needed to do from a training perspective, so we could generate a power profile for the whole team time trial for him. Yep. Hello.
Yeah, it was just you were just breaking up a little bit there, so it was just maybe your signal. So yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Just getting a couple.
Wi-Fi's not fantastic.
No worries. Yeah.
So yeah, we used the Notio Connect back at Harrogate World Champs. Myself and John riding the course. So from an accurate course profile, a very accurate one, we could then generate our target power for each rider's turn throughout the whole course, and then effectively you just have a power profile that you can pop into your kicker or Neo or whatever else. Then you can train on the course exactly as we needed. So we had a set strategy, which was roughly, give or take, 1 minute turns. But we knew, because of the exact course profile, we collected the slope, we collected all the road roughness data, that we knew exactly what sort of power he'd need to do and how he'd need to do it, which is really, really helpful for him. And it meant he knew the course inside out, back to front when he turned up, and we obviously went pretty well when the race came around. But how does that really impact on everybody else? So how can it help you? I think the biggest thing that Notio can do is effectively enable you to test every single day of the week. It's probably a bit of an exaggeration to say that you could just go out there and test and you get excellent data, because you can't. You need to be a bit more switched on about it. You do need to know how to test, when is a good day, when's a bad day, what's a suitable road, and what variables you need to control. So things like not testing with lots of cars on the road, picking a nice quiet road, roads where you don't need to brake. So if you can do lots of loops and laps and repeats effectively, then that can be very, very beneficial to being confident in your results. And also the variables to control. So things like tire pressure, making sure that you're in the same gear, riding the same power and cadence, holding the same position, and that you've measured your system mass before every single run. Things like that, they make a massive difference actually onto how good your data quality is and how trustworthy the numbers are that come out at the back end. In short, if you put rubbish in, then you'll get rubbish out. But if you really do focus on those smaller details and that you're very regimented in how you test, then you can get some very, very good data out. We've seen repeats in the region where you can get 0.001 variance in, meters squared of someone's CDA. Whereas if you really don't focus on those kind of details and you're moving around into different positions or riding certain sections harder or easier than others, or you're fatiguing or whatever it might be, then you could see 0.005 meters squared variance in your CDA. So it's kind of very important that you really do focus on those smaller details and make sure you just document them. A notepad goes a long way in making sure you get good test data, because what you find out a couple hours later when you're sitting in front of your computer and you really want to pull those tests apart is that you've forgotten what you did on run 3B because someone rang you at the time or dropped you a text or whatever it might be. You've got to really be focused on getting those down. And the final one that we've really found good use in is just digging into race performances. So quite a few people go and do their midweek 10 back in the UK every single week, and some weeks they'll go really well, some weeks they won't, and the power won't really explain why, and it's always a question mark of, well, why did I perform well, why did I go badly? And I think that's the biggest question that coaches tend to get, and trying to answer for athletes of actually what caused you to go well or what caused you to not perform at the level you required. I think Notio starts to give answers towards that. So was it colder, was it warmer, was it a headwind and you rode it poorly, did you not hold your head in the right position? All these kind of variables that you wouldn't be able to tell, but by being able to report back on your CDA value throughout a whole time trial, and be able to look at the headwind and the tailwind and be able to look at how you paced it relative to all the climbs, it's just such an awesome tool really for that. I think every single motorsport team in the world looks back at their race data and pulls it apart into tiny little pieces to know what went right and what went wrong. And I think it's always been quite hard to do in cycling, because all you've ever had is power and speed. You don't have all the other environmentals that go with it, but now they are there, and now you can really get a good grasp on what actually happened, and therefore you can address those issues going forward. You can make sure that you put in strategies to ensure the right position's held, or how to pace it into headwinds or up to climbs, or if a rider can't do a specific thing with their position, so you've been testing over maybe shorter runs, you've been doing 1-2 minute runs, and then suddenly they're doing a 2-hour time trial and they're fatiguing, and you can see that in their roll data because they're rolling around on their saddle. Then it's another direction to address their performance, rather than just being more aero or putting more power out. It's actually looking at their strength and conditioning and how they ride the bike and how they fatigue, and it's just another great, I guess, aspect of the tool.
And interestingly, Dan, we're working with some teams at the moment where that's exactly what they're doing. So they've been in the wind tunnel, they've been in the velodrome, and now they're using the Notio to complement and obviously validate that actually, okay, we found this really good position for this rider. We've gone outside to do some real world tests. And again, as you say, it's really important to do that under race conditions. So at or near race pace. Whereas you say if you do a training session, maybe 3 by 15 minutes or 4 by 10, whatever it might be, you can quickly determine whether your position is holding or not, right? That's obviously a big advantage. And it's the rider who actually manages to do all that and bring everything together, the pacing and everything, the ones who tend to be faster. So, and in your experience, can you just explain to everybody, because obviously, you know, you guys and some people have lots of access to wind tunnels and track testing and stuff like that they could do. But in your experience, you know, are you seeing, you know, is there sometimes situations where riders you know, you say, oh, this 3D is fantastic, we should blow it out of the water. And then when you get to racing, it's for whatever reason hasn't transferred.
Yeah, it's quite a common occurrence, to be honest. Wind tunnels are great because of their precision. You can look into the small details quite confidently, but on the other hand, you are riding effectively a glorified turbo trainer, and what position you hold in the wind tunnel is not always, and also quite often, not the position that you hold on the road. So we have great access. We've had great access to the Boardman Centre and now to Silverstone Sports and Engineering Hub. And we do use them. We've used them for a lot of our skin suit testing and development and things around equipment where you can be super confident of the data you're getting out for example, changing a base bar or a wheel. But position is so specific to everything, the power you're producing, the cadence you're at, the track or the road that you're riding. And therefore, if you want good data and trustworthy data and something that you can really hang your hat on, then testing in that race environment is absolutely critical. And yeah, you don't race in the wind tunnel, but you do race either on the track or on the road. So being able to measure there is very important.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So if we move on, then I've got some time for Q&A. If we just go back into that one.
I think they're up here somewhere. Let's go get them. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay, so yeah, so 2 questions, a couple of questions here. So Joe, your question about golden cheetah graphs. So hopefully this will address that. But we've one of our developers in Notio itself is writing and producing graphs. We have a specific version of golden cheetah. So when you buy the product and you get access to the app, we provide you with a download to our version, and obviously we are contributing to that community. So eventually those graphs will become available to the community. But right now it's a specific version that we provide. So just get in touch and we can give you the link to download. And then so Aidan, how are you? No, you don't need to take your iOS device with you when you're actually testing. You can, they're expensive these days depending on which version you have. So there's no requirement for you to have an iOS device with you. You can leave that where it's probably safer rather than popping out in your pocket. Lane, your question about can Notio be used if one doesn't have an iOS device? Unfortunately, right now, no, it doesn't, because the Notio doesn't have any means to communicate with, so you can't input anything or tell it to communicate with a device. So you need that iOS device, either a phone or an iPad, to be able to configure. So for instance, pairing with power meters and going through the setup is why you would need that. So another question, Christoph, your question regarding data via JSON CSV now. Could you not disclose the different fields saved in the fit file? That's okay. Okay, so I think maybe the best way to explain the answer to that is, so we're not using the fit protocol or fit file format, because obviously the Notio itself is grabbing those data streams from your power meter, your speed sensor. If you're using a Garmin device, you're still able to get a fit file of that particular ride. But if you want to do the analysis, it's via the JSON CSV that will contain the Notio data. I hope that answers your question. If not, just get in touch and I will clarify that. So yes, Manuel, absolutely. The app is constantly being updated. So we are working really hard to so we've had recent changes to the out and back protocol, for instance. There is, I think there's a new release due very soon. And then obviously, as you say, as you quite rightly point out, you can still use Golden Cheetah to help and analyze and see where there's potential errors. But the whole idea of the app, and this is probably more relevant to people who have previously used Notio, the whole idea of the app is to try and remove some of the work that you have to do as a user to try and figure out, have I got the correct benchmark right, or the correct data. We're trying to build more functionality into the app to avoid you having to do that. So again, we'll publish some more of that. So it's easier to see what we've what features and improvements we have coming. Okay, so working down these questions keep coming in, which is great. So thank you very much. Keep them coming. How do you difference in speed on track? In corners, the bike is going faster than the bike. That's a very good question, Dion. And it's something, again, I think I might have mentioned earlier in the webinar. We are working on improving a protocol and testing for the track. I think in Dan's case, Dan, I don't know whether you want to add, it's a good question. Obviously, the angle and the speed you're moving on the track.
Yep.
Do you, is that something you're taking care of through your analysis in MATLAB, or?
Yep, it is. So in two different ways. So firstly, throughout the banking, your vertical tire load increases. So if you were to just assume it was the same, then your rolling resistance would be the same, or be slightly higher throughout the banking because your wheel speed increases. But effectively, you're at a banked angle, you have gravity acting vertically downwards, and you have a centripetal acceleration acting out in the radial direction. And you could do the trigonometry between the two if you knew your bank angle and assumed you were normal to that. Or, as Notio does, it measures vertical acceleration, which is nice and easy. So you can use that. Typically, you get about, give or take, 40 or 50% increase in your vertical load on the tyres throughout the banking. And then secondly, as you say, your tyre speed increases, which is because your centre of mass is covering a shorter distance. It's going through a tighter radius throughout the banking. So your centre of mass, give or take, carries on at about the same velocity, and your wheel speed increases proportional. It's obviously attached to your centre of mass. There's just a centre of mass height relative to the contact patch. So once you know the centre of mass height, and you can use the inertial measurement unit, the gyro in the Notio, you can get the tilt angle of the rider. So if you know that, the angle and the height, then you can figure out what your centre of mass velocity is throughout the banking and how that varies relative to wheel speed. So yeah, you can account for it, and we do account for it in our maths, and yeah, I'm sure in Notio's track edition, then that will also be accounted for.
Excellent, thanks, Dan. So moving on, is it necessary to do an out and back calibration before using, or will GC still provide the CDA data? So yes, it is necessary, because the Notio doesn't know anything about the environment that it's been bolted onto a bike. It needs some form of calibration. It needs some reference as to the mass that it's actually trying to take with it, if you like. So the rider, the bike. So the calibration is really important. And again, we prescribe that in the app. We strongly recommend, if you have an idea what the CDA is before you use, then you can put that in as your benchmark CDA. But ultimately, we do recommend that you do a calibration, and we're constantly working to provide that. And that leads on to another question from Norman. You're asking about testing protocols. Absolutely, yes. And as well as the Golden Cheetah webinar that I talked about earlier, where we're going to talk about and do a session specifically on Golden Cheetah, we're also going to do a session on testing protocols for sure. So we'll get into more of the out and back. And obviously Dan alluded to it as well, where you really have to sort of build some, I guess, again, with my coach hat on, I would say you wouldn't go and do an FTP test when you felt like it. You kind of, you schedule, the piece of road, or in most cases now, a lot of people do them indoors, but if you do it outside, you'll have, pretty much regular places that you use, and aero testing will be no different. So you've got some consistency. And so if you need some help in the meantime, just reach out to us. Happy to talk through some of the testing protocols, but we will do a specific webinar on benchmark testing for sure. Then moving on, Michael, your question regarding having more than one sensor on a bike, like one on the front and one off the saddle. Good question. I don't know. Right now, we're sort of just working with one. So that's how we currently work. But you know, that's something we may come back to. But right now, it's just one device. Okay, current iOS device. Yeah, you need. Oh, cut me off the hop, but I'll type the answer to that to give you the exact, because of course Apple keep moving the goalposts for us. So yes, you can use an older phone, but there is a limit. Well, I'll get the exact answer for you so I don't give you some misinformation. That's to Lane. Mark. So yes, working with third parties like Training Peaks, conversations ongoing. It's a very good question, and the reason there's an industry group right now, and we everybody's working to try and come up with some standards. And Training Peaks, WKO5, Today's Plan, all the different providers are just waiting for the standard to be ratified. So things like being able to use the Notio. Right now, the Garmin head unit is the only one that you can use it with. But we hope that when this standard for aerofields is agreed amongst the industry, that then we will see an opening up of things like Training Peaks and others for sure. The third-party providers are reluctant to write something specific for one device, which is understandable. But once we reach an industry standard, that should get rid of that particular problem. And we are very much in the midst of that in terms of working with other vendors to agree on what the aerofield standards should be. Okay, so Jamie, yeah, the device is mounted on the bike. You get two brackets with the Notio in the box, one for a road bike and one for a TT bike. And yes, there is specific test protocols built into the app, out and back for sure. Yeah, and then, sorry, Manuel, the problem is that we don't have good data if we can't extract a stable part of the lap. Okay, so yes, in that question, Manuel, you're asking, you can still do that inside Golden Cheetah if you have a problem with some data, with a part of a lap or a test that you might do. Oh, this might be for you, Dan. So Emil is asking, what kind of savings in Watson City could I expect to find by testing? He's a triathlete. He's got a CDA of around 0.24, according to Best Bike Split. Okay. So that's a really good question, Emil. So thanks for asking. But Dan, I mean, I mean, I think from a coaching perspective, first off, and how I got used to, what I used to find was I had riders who tested in the wind tunnel and they tested on the track, and then we went and did some efforts outside. We weren't getting the CDA. That's where I started to realize that field testing is really important. And in terms of gain, sometimes you'll have more access to this type of information than I will, probably just by sheer volume. But do you want to sort of add a little bit more to that?
Sure. So 0.24 for a triathlete is a pretty good starting point. I'd say some of the best triathletes I've worked with, you're getting into the realms of 0.21 out in the real world. If a triathlete cracks 0.20, then I'd say they're pretty much world class, or should be doing some outrageous bike splits and breaking records. So yeah, there is some fairly sizable gains. What's that, sort of 20% improvement you could look to get? I'd say 10 to 15 is a sensible one to really dig into. The things to focus on for him would be what is sustainable for his duration of race. If he's out doing a triathlon for, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours on the bike. There's obviously a lot of time there where you've got to be riding in that position, so a position that is sustainable over the longer duration. But equally looking at what might be sustainable for short durations where aerodynamics are more important. So headwinds are going to be one way you really want to be tucking in, having a low head position, etc. But you might have a more comfortable sort of standard position that you would use for either slight drags or little climbs or little tailwind sections. Other than that, looking at skin suits, calf guards are going to be a big gains, or tri suits. Obviously, there's substantial gains in clothing, even at slower speeds. It's very, very important, and it's something that a lot of people have overlooked for years. So I think that's one to definitely look at. And then hydration and nutrition storage. There's horror stories and some pretty horrific pictures out there of a lot of triathletes taping God knows what to their bike. Trying to be clean with how you do that is massively important. So hiding bottles away behind your saddle is very efficient. Sometimes between your arms is good, not always. It can be pretty bad. Using cleanly designed integrated solutions as well for storage. So a lot of bento boxes now, and even sort of down tube BB boxes are becoming more popular, and obviously enables you to store your spares or nutrition in a much more cleaner way. So yeah, just focusing on the stability side, looking at clothing, and then yeah, clean nutrition and storage.
Brilliant. Okay. So moving on, another question: do you have to do a benchmark ride? Is it possible to just put CDA value, determine the lap? Yes, you can put that CDA value in. I think I might have said that earlier, and see the difference in rides. Yes, you can. And obviously, you know, sometimes I recommend when you get the device, you know, you don't have to do a benchmark ride first off just to get to use it. You can go and collect some data first, and then you can actually apply a benchmark ride later if you so wish. So, so that's obviously quite an important point. But
I would add to that as well, and just say that that's probably the very first thing to do is to go out and just ride with it. Just get used to what happens when you go uphill, downhill, what happens when you lift your head up, what happens when you sit on the base bar, and then just go and look at the data in Golden Cheetah and get a handle on actually what happens in all those scenarios, and then go out and start to appreciate the differences and do things as well, like repeating the same test over. So if you find a good test location and you've got, let's say, 5 tests, do the exact same test 5 times over, see what your repeatability is, see what happens when you fatigue, or do you start rolling in the saddle, and just getting a grasp on what you're like as a rider, and obviously what the tools like to use as well, before you just dive straight in with trying different helmets or try and stack height or whatever it might be. Just get a grasp on how repeatable you are.
Okay, so one other question, left-right variance in terms of gyroscope. Yes, you can see that in the analysis charts in Golden Cheetah. So movement from left to right, yes, it is. And then, Michael, your question regarding Wahoo Bolt, Garmin. Yes, that was, I think I've answered that earlier, but again, just for reference. So Wahoo is definitely one of the companies, I believe, who is also waiting for the standards. They're willing to publish or allow integration. It's just waiting for this standard to be agreed. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. Everybody's waiting for devices. The software suppliers are waiting for devices to come to market. So hopefully that will come. So the other couple of other questions. Yes, you do need a power meter. Oval chain rings, for which most players are not. Is this a problem? Oval chain rings, not that we have seen, but I guess if you're comparing, and I guess if you're comparing one baseline test to another, and you change position, then yeah, I'll need to come back to you on that, Lane. I don't know the exact answer in terms of, yeah, because obviously you're inferring that oval chain rings might cause an issue around power meter. But I will get a confirmation on that. So more questions. Is the differences between TT helmets when testing outside? Yes, you can. I can. It's exactly what I've done previously. Yes, you can do the difference. And as Dan said, just the hygiene and the testing protocols that you use and where you use, are important. So, so yeah. And then Notio can provide real-time CDA on your Garmin, yes, while you're riding. Again, the caveat is obviously over longer durations, where you might have higher variability of environmental conditions. But yes, you can see it while you're riding. So even while you're doing a test, there is the ability for there is that. So last question, what's the resolution when testing outside? So we record on the device itself at 4 Hertz. So the Notio is collecting data from your power meter, from wind and all the different sensors at quite a high resolution or rate. So I hope that answers your question, Emil, but please get in touch if it's not answering.
I can jump in a bit on that one and just say
no problem,
that the power meter that you use massively affects the resolution that you can get. If you had, say, a low quality single side power meter with quite a large imbalance, then you're likely to have pretty poor repeatability and resolution in your testing. Whereas if you use a much higher quality, something like a Quark or an SRM, and you're a very stable rider, with minimal things like gusting wind can be really bad, then if you get rid of all that, then you could see, like I said earlier, something in the region of 0.001 meters squared in your CDA across a range of runs, whereas the converse could be true. You can see a whole lot worse, sort of 4, 5, 6 times worse than that if you're a fatigued rider with the left side power meter in gusty conditions, etc. It's just being smart about how you test, and that's going to definitely help you get better data out of it.
Okay, so Phil, your question regarding during longer rides, if you want to just reach out to us separately about that, and we'll check and double check as to why you're having that particular problem. So just reach out to us and we'll do that offline. The question from Norman, Dan, this is for you. What's the impact of a 20% improvement of CDA, as referenced earlier, in terms of speed over 1 hour or an hour? So, what are the types of rewards you can get? So, like we started the presentation with saying that you could invest huge amounts of time and effort in doing lots of training, which obviously people are doing, but a 20% improvement in CDA is, I guess, okay, depending on where that CDA is, right? So,
you would get a cube root of 20% increase in speed, roughly speaking. Although there's a little bit to do with rolling resistance increase, etc. So that's a good starting point. Obviously, if you're riding at 30k an hour and you drop your CDA by 20%, then you'll end up going a whole lot quicker than if you started at 50k an hour. So even though aerodynamics from a power perspective is more important for faster riders because more of their power goes into aero, they actually see a lower increase in speed relative to their starting point, whereas slower riders see a greater increase in speed despite the fact they actually have less total aerodynamic drag from an absolute perspective. But yeah, 20%'s pretty massive. So, for us on the track, we're talking that'd be 100 watts improvement, and we'd go, a whole lot quicker. We're breaking world records, no problem. But if you're doing sort of 30k an hour, you do the maths on it. I can't right now off the top of my head, but cube root of 20% is probably a good starting point if you ignore drivetrain and tires.
Okay, and one last question from Lane. How often is the CDA updated on your Garmin head unit? You can set the recording window 15, 30, or 60 seconds. We recommend 60 seconds because of the amount of information that the system is trying to compute. But that's so. For example, if you made a change while doing a test, you're not going to see an immediate response on the head unit. If you've got it set to 60 seconds, it'll take a little time for it to make those calculations. Okay, so lots of questions, and obviously this is the first webinar. I know some people have messaged to say that there was a problem with some of Dan's sound. I hope that didn't put too many people off, and going forward, obviously we'll take that feedback on board and make sure we we try and avoid that. So apologies for that. So to sort of finish off, again, if there's any other questions, just reach out to us, get in touch. We've got, as I said, support folks based in Europe on European time. You're not having to wait for Canada to wake up. And then obviously if you're in the US or Canada, we have some folks there obviously as well. The next one we'll be talking about benchmark testing, testing protocols, and we will also be doing a separate webinar on Golden Cheetah. Yes, Dan's contact info. Yeah, if you want to get in touch directly with me, Norman, I'll be able to do that for you. And yes, the webinar is recorded, and we will, for everybody who registered, even if you didn't show up, you'll be able to watch the webinar at your own leisure. And then eventually we will publish that on our YouTube channel, which gives people a chance to sort of understand what the product is all about and get to hear the information. Hopefully it's recorded okay from Dan. And just creep down. So yes, you will get a link to the recording afterwards. Yes, and we will share it. So anyway, thanks very much for your time, Dan, and joining us today. It's been really appreciated. I know you're busy getting ready for the national championships in a couple of days, so to give up your time is much appreciated, and hopefully we'll get you back prior to some of the exciting stuff you got planned this year around the hour record, because I'm sure people will be keen to find out. Maybe we can do one before and after, right? Because
a prediction one and an analysis one. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm cool with
Yeah,
that.
an analysis one would be very interesting. But no, I much appreciate your time and your support and your input to help us. It's been invaluable, so much appreciated. And then without further ado, say thank you to everybody for joining us. Said the response was really good. Again, all feedback's appreciated. We want to do more of these. We've got more planned. If there's other things you think we should add, just get in touch. And that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening and putting up with my voice for an hour. So take care. Thank you.